Ay, ay, ay. It's wonderful to refer to you as Senator, Ken. Congratulations for all that you have accomplished and all the great pride that you have brought not only all of us in this state, but people throughout the country. Because as you know, Latinos from everywhere look up to you and call you in your office every day because they think you're their senator. So congratulations, Ken, and thank you for those very, very, very warm and gracious remarks. I want to thank everyone who spoke. The mayor, Antonio Villaraigosa, who some time ago, as he was contemplating whether he was going to run a second time, he and I had a conversation in Los Angeles where it was a very complicated conversation, as we will say, but he has gone on and done what he's done, and we are so proud of him. So congratulations to you, Antonio. Remarkable, remarkable accomplishment. Governor Richardson had to leave, but he does embellish the story a little bit. For the reporters in the back of the room, please don't quote him too literally. But I want to thank the governor for his very kind and warm and generous remarks. Janet, what can I say? You started this, and I'm glad it wasn't a roast, this session with your wonderful summary of my life, but more than that, your very personal comments about me. So I thank you very much, and congratulations to you for what you do for La Raza and for all of us. Before I introduce my family, I want you to know something. You might expect that, given my background, which you've heard about, that I have received a few awards here and there. But I want you to know that as I sat here listening to all of you who gave me tribute, I was very, very moved. And I must say that of all the events that I've been to where someone has recognized me, this one is the best. It really is. And I'm going to get back to that story in a second, but it has to do with my roots. And for those of you who are from South Texas, El Valle de Rio Grande, where we drank the water. You know, when we were raised in a very small town in South Texas, and where you looked at the rest of the country as almost a foreign land, very far away, and then for so many of us who have left those very small communities and have done what we have done, and then to be here with such an extraordinary group of elected officials and leaders, community activists, and people from all over the country, you must understand how much that moves me. And that's why I say this award is the best. I want to introduce my wife, Cindy, who is here with me at the front table, who, I'm going to be careful, Mickey, who was a strong supporter of Barack Obama long before I was, and who persuaded me to get on board. I'll explain that comment in a second. And I want to introduce a couple of family members, a brother who's come all the way from Texas, Oscar Peña, who was from Dallas, and his wife, Rochelle, who are here. And my brother, Alfredo Peña, who is a lawyer here in town, and his wife, Dolores. And there are a lot of friends here. If I introduced all of them, it would be here too long. Let me explain why it is that I said, Mickey, I'll be careful. Early this morning, I was, after getting 4 hours of sleep, finalizing my remarks about why I was going to persuade you to support Barack Obama as our next president. But then I got a funny phone call about 10:30 from Mickey. And Mickey says, now, Federico, remember, you're not supposed to make a partisan speech. You're supposed to talk about your life story. And the theme of this leadership series is to encourage Latino leaders to come and talk about the obstacles that we face in our lives and how we overcame them and how we were able to accomplish whatever we've been able to accomplish. So I had to get that speech, Mickey, and throw it in the trash can and quickly scribble a few notes about my life. So I have to be very careful, according to the dictates of the chief here, my good friend Mickey Ibarra, not to be too partisan and not to say too much about the gentleman whose button is on my lapel. How'd I do, Mickey? Am I doing all right? All of you know, because everyone else has acknowledged it, that I'm a national co-chair of the Barack Obama campaign. I'm very proud of it. I'm going to be brief because we have lots of things to do. Ken, thank you for being here. Let's give him a round of applause, please. He's a great man. You know, I think my story is very similar to the story of everybody else in this room. We, in our own ways, have faced obstacles from wherever we have come from and whatever we have done. And in some way, we have persevered. And we have overcome those obstacles, and sometimes we've been knocked down, but we've always picked ourselves up. And that's why so many of you are here today. And there are millions of Latinos and Latinas all across our country who have done what you have done and what I have done, in the sense that they have gone way beyond what their parents had done and what they ever thought was achievable. And because of that, our nation is great. Our nation will be greater in the future because, as we know, this nation has always been a nation of immigrants. And with the new wave of immigrants whose sons and daughters are winning gold medals at the Olympics, whose sons and daughters are the valedictorians of their high school classes, and whose families are then threatened with deportation. We are one America. We are America. And Thursday, I will once again be with the immigrants who are going to be marching in the north side of this city, as I did 3 years ago when 80,000 came here to Denver and marched at the state capitol. Some of you know, gracias. Gracias. Sí se puede. Gracias. I was born in South Texas, as you know. My mother and father had 6 children. What you probably do not know is that after I was born, I was the 3rd oldest in the family. My brother Oscar was 2 years older than I was, and then his older brother Gustavo was 2 years older than he was. My mother had triplets in 1948. And as the story goes, nobody had a clue, particularly the doctor. Era de Brownsville. Please, don't quote me. I'm going to get letters from the doctors in Brownsville. I know I am. And as the story goes, my dad is in the waiting room, and the doctor comes out and says, "Mr. Peña, congratulations." And he came back 5 minutes later and said, "Mr. Peña, congratulations again." And you know the last line, right? "Mr. Peña, congratulations again." So my mother and father had 6 children in the course of 7 years. And the point that I want to make is, like so many mothers and fathers, so many Latinos and Latinas across this country, their main commitment was to us, their children. They sacrificed everything for us. From day one, it was always understood and expected that we were going to excel in school and that we were all going to go to college, which we have done. Unfortunately, 3 of us became lawyers. But it was because of our parents who understood their roots, which went back over 240 years in Laredo, where the founder of Laredo, Texas, El Coronel Tomás Sánchez, is my great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And he had ancestors who fought on my mother's lineage during the Civil War, one of whom, Santos Benavides, used to ride his horse from Laredo to Austin, Texas, as a member of the first territorial legislature, but because he could only speak Spanish, he needed a translator, and people were offended in the legislature back then that he needed to use a translator. In some ways, some things have not changed. But that's how I was raised. And I was raised with the understanding that I should always be proud of my heritage, my family, my roots. And whatever I have been able to accomplish in my life, it has come from that self-centeredness, that confidence, that feeling that you're standing on a rock because you've been here for a long, long time. And many of you have been here for a long, long time, particularly those of you from New Mexico. That has helped guide me in my life. So when I moved to Austin, Texas, which I thought was a foreign country, 300 miles from Brownsville, Texas, and I entered the University of Texas that had 35,000 students, which, by the way, had a student population larger than my hometown of Brownsville, Texas. And when I set foot on that campus and realized that less than 1% of the entire student body was minority, including African Americans and Latinos and Native Americans and Asian Americans, less than 1% of the campus was minority. I can recall walking through the campus from one end to the other and not being able to say hello to one person because I didn't know anybody. But I was there for 4 years, and somehow I persevered. And then when I applied to the University of Texas School of Law, I took the law school standard admissions test. For those of you who are lawyers, you take the LSAT. I am a terrible test taker, and I did poorly, very poorly. I won't tell you how poorly. I don't want to discourage any of the young people here. But I wanted to go to the University of Texas School of Law, so I applied. And I remember the assistant dean, God bless his heart, he's no longer with us, said, Federico, you can't be admitted. Your scores are too low. And based on statistical analysis, we predict that not only can you not succeed in the University of Texas School of Law, if for some good fortune, some luck you're able to graduate, you won't pass the bar exam. And so you're taking a seat in the school that ought to go to somebody else whom we know, based on their test scores, will absolutely succeed and go on to become a great, brilliant lawyer. And so I didn't accept no. It wasn't the first time that I have not accepted no. And I kept bothering him. Every 2 or 3 weeks, I go back and see him. Come on, Dean, you got to let me in. There has never been a family and a lawyer in my entire extended family, and I want to be the first. And he said, no, your scores are too low. So I went back week after week, and finally, 2 weeks before school starts, when they have, I think, 5 slots left for other people, I guess, he said, well, you've been so persistent, and you apparently really want to be a lawyer, we'll finally let you into the law school. Well, fast forward, and irony of ironies, years later, I was invited back to give the commencement address at the University of Texas School of Law. I was made an honorary member of the COIF, and now I am a distinguished alumni of the entire University of Texas school system. I have a feeling a lot of you in this room can relate to that story. I moved to Denver after I graduated from law school, and I did pass the bar exam in Texas. My brother Alfredo was here. I don't think I knew anybody else. Alfredo was going to law school here. I was intending to continue my civil rights work, to go work with California Rural Legal Aid in California. It would have been interesting had that happened, but I stayed in Denver and I went to work for MALDEF. And so as a civil rights lawyer, I made the decision not to become a corporate lawyer, but to become a civil rights lawyer because I believed that was the right thing to do. That was in my heart. I was involved in the first tri-ethnic desegregation lawsuit in the United States, Keyes versus the Denver public school system. And that case went all the way to the Supreme Court and back up again and back. And my responsibility was to represent the Latino students and the Latino teachers who were not represented in that case. And we were able to do that. And after I did that, and it was an interesting time because that's when somebody named Corky Gonzalez was in this city, and he was marching everywhere. And he created a lot of excitement in this city and a lot of challenges. And so when you're a civil rights lawyer doing the kind of work that I was doing back then in that tumultuous time, and by the way, my hair was a little longer back then. It was a challenge, but somehow we persevered, and we thank Corky for his contributions. When I decided to run for the state legislature, someone said, you can't do that because you're not from Denver. I moved into my district. There was a gentleman there who had been a community activist for 25 years. I was the outside shot. I walked for 5.5 months, door to door. I was elected my first term. And my second year in the legislature, I was elected the minority leader, which is very unusual for a 32-year-old freshman legislator. And it was so tumultuous that the person that I beat for that position, who was a great Democrat for many years, left the party and became a Republican. But we did what we could in the state legislature of the minority party. I left the legislature, and someone came to me and says, why don't you run for mayor of Denver? And Antonio, I said, why should I do that? There's an incumbent who's been here for 14 years. He's got $1 million in his war chest. He has 99% name recognition. I have 1% name recognition. My first name is Federico. My last name is Peña. Why wouldn't? And people encouraged me to run, and so I ran. And as been said earlier, there were so many naysayers. People would say, Denver's not ready for a Hispanic mayor. You're from Texas. You're too short. You're not very well known. And you don't have any money. But I sensed in this city what I feel in this country today, this undercurrent of discontent, this sense of thousands of people in the city who wanted to contribute, who wanted to participate, and felt they weren't being given an opportunity. And I was one of them. And I said, we are going to bring this coalition together of African Americans and Latinos and Asians and environmentalists and labor and neighborhood people and gays who had never participated in a mayoral election in this city. And we brought everybody together. And the night before the primary election, I got a call from a reporter whom I will not mention and not identify. And he said, I'm required to call you because I'm calling all the candidates running for mayor. How do you think you're going to do tomorrow morning in the primary? There were 7 people running for mayor. And I said, you know, I have this strange feeling. I think we're going to come in first. And there wasn't laughter, but there was a silence on the phone for about 10 seconds. And he said, well, we have you coming in 5th. So the next day, it snowed in the middle of May in Denver. And we had a record voter turnout in the history of Denver in a mayor's race, and I came in first. And the next day, after the election, that reporter came back into my campaign office, and he took his little note card. For those of you who are reporters, you know those little pads you have, and he closed it up, and he put it in the back of his pants, and he folded his arms, and he said, okay, tell me what's happened to my city. So I had to explain to him what had happened to our city. And so, as they say, the rest is sort of history. We went through a tough time in rebuilding this city. We hope you enjoy it. But most of all, I want to echo the comments that others have said. When I decided to finally run for mayor of Denver, I also looked to somebody else. And he was here earlier today, and his name is Henry Cisneros, who was the mayor of San Antonio before I was mayor of Denver. And he came here one day to speak to a crowd, and of course, Henry's an extraordinary and gifted orator. And I listened to him, I heard him, and I said, maybe there's some way I can possibly run. So all of us in our own way have been inspired by others. When I went to Washington, There were some people who said that people with a last name like Peña are not appointed to the Department of Transportation. That's sort of a different kind of non-traditional appointment, or whatever people refer to it as. But we were very proud of the work that we did there. I won't correct Bill's story about how I became Secretary of Energy. I did not use that adjective that he used. But I was very proud to serve in those two departments, and came back home and started a business, and I'm a businessman now. But I'm not going to tell you the rest of my story. It's very common to what all of you have experienced. I simply want to say 2 or 3 things when I think about what I really want to say to all of you today. And that is very simple. When I talk to young kids and they ask me, what should I think about? I want to become an astronaut. I want to become a doctor. But I'm not sure I can do it. I say 3 things. Number 1, believe in yourself. Believe in yourself. What's in your heart? If you truly believe you can become an astronaut, and if you want it badly enough, go do it. I don't say it's too hard, you're too short, you're from another planet. Go do it. And the second thing I say to them is, believe in where you have come from. You have a proud history, a proud tradition. It is deep. It is rich. It will give you strength. Remember it and stick by it. And the third thing that I say to people, don't forget to seek some guidance from the one above. Because there will be, in your journey, there will be some ups and there will be some downs. There will be some highs and there will be some lows. And you always need to have that guiding force in you to keep you focused straight ahead. So my closing remarks to all of you is that we have come a long, long way. Each of you in your own way have gone through your struggles and accomplished much to be here today. We're all thankful for the guidance we got from our families or relatives or someone who inspired us, who encouraged us, and who had confidence in us. And our responsibility with the extraordinary political power that we now have in this country, and people like Antonio and others fully realize this when they live in a city like Los Angeles, is our political power, friends, is just starting. Is just starting. And we already know that the census has advanced the time before 2050 when our country is half minority and we will be almost 35% of the United States population. But with that potential, with that opportunity comes responsibility. All of us have the responsibility to make sure that as our communities grow, as we contribute to our country, that we find a way to do what we can to eliminate this extraordinary dropout rate in our school systems. We cannot advance with 50% of our children dropping out of school. It will make no difference if we are the largest population if we are dropping out of school. It will make no difference if we are the largest population if our kids are still in our jails. It will do no difference if our kids don't have good jobs. We are America. Our responsibility, our obligation is not simply to celebrate what we do in this city this week. It's not simply to recognize the great achievements that so many people have done for many, many decades in our country so that we could be here today. Our responsibility is to look to the future and to say we have to do whatever we need to do now to make sure that all these young kids do better than we have done. Move this country forward, become the next presidents, become the next CEOs, become the next chairman of boards, become the next astronauts and scientists and Nobel Prize winners, so that in the year 2050, all of us can say, if we're still around, that we were proud of what we did in the year 2008 because we made sure our community continued to be great in this country. That is our responsibility. That is our obligation. And it is with that spirit I very humbly accept this reward on behalf of the thousands of great Latino leaders in our country who couldn't be here today. Gracias, que Dios les bendiga. Gracias.